Valmont Castle, an 18th-century estate tucked away among the pine-covered hills on the outskirts of Geneva, blazed like an opera stage on opening night. Majestic white stone columns, gardens trimmed like woodcut engravings, and the stifling air of old-world aristocracy enveloped everything. Even the cobblestones seemed to carry the weight of a world long dead, yet unwilling to leave. In the upstairs dressing room, Isabelle Marceau stood alone before the mirror. The ivory wedding gown, adorned with hand-stitched lace from Paris, clung to her slim figure. Flawlessly beautiful, almost unnaturally so. The mirror reflected a woman who seemed perfect: honey-brown skin, sharply defined features, eyes like thin blades. But within that gaze was something no one at the wedding could see: doubt. This marriage was not a love story. It was a deal, a discreet merger. The groom, Etienne Darcy, hailed from a declining line of French nobility. The Darcy name had once been a symbol of continental private banking, but for years now, it had been little more than a pretentious shell. The Marceau family, Isabelle's parents, were self-made tech magnates. Their names splashed across every conceivable Forbes list. This marriage was strategic, a stock alliance, aristocratic legacy from the groom's side, financial power from the bride's. Isabelle had agreed. At the time, she believed she was in control. Etienne seemed courteous, intellectual, agreeable, but gradually, through suffocating dinners, half-serious comments, and the way he tuned out when she spoke about investment work, she understood. He didn't respect her. He didn't respect anyone outside his class. He once said, "You don't need to work so hard anymore. You've already won. You got me." She had laughed then. There was a knock at the door. Her mother, Helene Marceau, stepped in, resplendent in a sapphire velvet gown. Behind her came her father, Henri, a man with eyes as sharp as a scalpel, known to kill billion-dollar deals with a single nod. "You look stunning," her mother murmured, adjusting a strand of hair. "Are you ready?" her father asked. She nodded, though inside she felt nothing. Downstairs, the music swelled. Etienne stood there in a bespoke tuxedo from Milan, handsome, poised, and completely soulless. She walked to him, laid her hand on his, cold as iron. The ceremony was swift, seamless, perfect, like an investor pitch. Not a scratch, not a flicker of emotion. Isabelle Darcy. The announcer called the name as if unveiling a product. The reception began. Under a crystal marquee, politicians, banking shareholders, and international journalists raised their glasses in congratulations. Isabelle smiled, posed for photos, clinked glasses, and delivered polished, meaningless small talk. She had been trained for this since childhood. Etienne? He was deep in conversation with men like himself. Tuxedo gentlemen sipping aged whiskey, speaking of the world as if it were their personal ledger. Isabelle withdrew to the fountain, a sliver of solitude amid the storm of ceremony. Then she heard it. Two middle-aged men chatting behind the hedge. Etienne's a clever one. Latching onto the Marceau family just bought him another decade. She thinks she married a prince. Turns out she's the controlling stake. Isabelle's heart didn't skip. She wasn't shocked. She had suspected it. But hearing it out loud made it undeniable. Unforgivable. She was a tool. And Etienne, from beginning to end, was just a desperate businessman betting on her name to prop up a crumbling empire. But Isabelle Marceau was not a prize. She was the one who writes the rules. And tonight she would rewrite the entire game. The lively courtyard now resembled a stage set for a grand masquerade. Everyone played their part: the powerful father, the charming groom, the radiant bride, the diamond-draped ladies, the smiles as fake and dried out as old lipstick. But Isabelle Marceau was no longer part of the act. She had stepped out of character. From the fountain, she returned to the hall with a faint smile and a gaze entirely transformed. No one noticed because no one cared. And that was exactly why they would lose. Etienne was standing near the bar, surrounded by his old boarding school friends, men with noble names and unearned pride. As they roared with laughter at some meaningless story, his eyes flicked over to her, narrowing slightly. Maybe he sensed something. Maybe he didn't. Isabelle didn't pause. She walked straight to the head table where both sets of parents were deep in conversation with major sponsors of the European Investment Fund. People Isabelle knew were quietly calculating the value of this union. "My daughter is a natural strategist," Isabelle Marceau was saying, her smile sharp as a blade. "And if Etienne truly wants to build a new financial platform, this is the best starting point he'll ever get." Etienne returned, champagne glass in hand. As he approached, their eyes met, and this time Isabelle saw it clearly. No love, no admiration. Only expectation, like a shareholder waiting on a signature. "You look stunning," he said, loudly enough for the entire table to hear. "I know," she replied. The table erupted in laughter. A clever response masquerading as bridal humor. But Etienne didn't laugh. He drained his glass as if to swallow the bitterness rising in his throat. The evening dragged on through a string of rituals, toasts, photographs, dancing. Isabelle went through every motion with machine-like precision. But her eyes always observing. Recording every glance. Every whisper exchanged among the guests. Then the moment came. The cake cutting. The towering white and gold wedding cake, crafted by a renowned chef from Lyon, was rolled into the center of the hall. Guests murmured, phones rose in unison. The Darcy media team was already in place. Etienne stood ready. His eyes now held something Isabelle knew too well, wounded pride. The blow from her father, declaring a 50-50 financial split, had cut deep. The second blow, Isabelle quietly leaving the key investor meeting halfway through. Now he wanted to reclaim the upper hand. Somehow, they held the knife together, slicing the first layer. Then came the ritual of feeding each other. Isabelle cut a small piece, gently lifting it to Etienne's mouth. He ate without expression. The cameras clicked. Then his turn. Etienne cut a slice, strikingly large. His eyes narrowed. His grip on the fork was tighter than necessary. And then, suddenly, he shoved the entire piece into her face. Fast. Forceful. Cold. No laughter. No gasps. Just stillness. The entire ballroom seemed frozen in place. Cream smeared across Isabelle's face, dripping onto the delicate lace of her gown. A few awkward chuckles escaped from Etienne's friends, but only for a beat, then silence. Because Isabelle didn't react the way they expected. She didn't laugh. She didn't scream. She didn't glare. She just stood there. Still. Silent. Like a marble statue in the middle of the crowd. Her mother placed a hand on her father's arm. "Don't." Henri Marceau rose from his seat, his eyes searing into Etienne. But he didn't move forward. He understood. Isabelle didn't need rescuing. She was in complete control of every second. She slowly picked up a napkin. Wiped the cream from her eyes. Her lips. Her neck. No haste. No tremble. She looked up, meeting Etienne's gaze with something no one could interpret. Then she turned. And walked away. Each step she took slashed through the mask the Darcy family had worn all evening. Behind her, whispers swelled like a wave. She was humiliated in front of everyone. What the hell was he thinking? She's not going to stay quiet. No one danced. The band played on, but the guests only stood, exchanging uneasy glances. The ballroom had turned into a crime scene, one of scandal, too refined to be named aloud. And Isabelle, now on the upper floor, quietly closed the door to the bridal suite behind her. She spoke only one sentence, not to the mirror, not to anyone. Just to herself. "The game has begun, Etienne." The cream-covered wedding dress was tossed straight into the bathtub. The once luxurious silk, now smeared and soaked, slumped into itself, just like the wedding it had been part of, dazzling, opulent, and rotten to the core. Isabelle stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, unblinking. Her honey-brown skin showed beneath the soaked fabric, not trembling, not furious. Just silent, the kind of silence that only comes when a woman has finally seen the truth of the game. The door swung open. She didn't need to turn to know who had entered. Isabelle Marceau, her mother, said nothing at first. As always, she ruled the room with her eyes alone. "You have two choices," she said, her voice as steady as a Swiss clock. "One, turn this into a public scandal. 2, I'll take a third option," Isabelle replied. "End it. Without a single tear." Henri Marceau and Malik, Isabelle's younger brother, entered a few minutes later. Malik, phone in hand, looked at his sister as if seeing a she-wolf. "No press has picked it up yet. We've got about 4 hours," he said. "Dad's locked down Darcy's internal media. Their PR team is panicking." Henri nodded, eyes fixed on his daughter. "We can force the divorce first thing tomorrow. The prenup is airtight. All your personal assets remain untouched. The Darcys have no leverage." Isabelle didn't ask why her parents had been so well prepared. She knew they always had a plan B. The real question now was, what did she want to do? She opened the wardrobe and changed into a simple black dress. Heels. No jewelry. No perfume. A different image, that of the one in command. "Call Etienne up here," she said. The room fell silent for a beat. Malik smirked. "I'll bring him up myself." When Etienne entered, still trying to look composed, his eye twitched. The bride in the ruined lace dress was gone. Now standing before him was Isabelle Marceau, the woman he once thought he could turn into a personal asset. "Are you here to apologize?" she asked, her hand resting lightly on the glass table. Etienne licked his lips, forcing a smile. "That maybe you overreacted." She didn't respond. Henri stepped forward and handed him an envelope. Etienne opened it. Inside, an official termination of the marriage and a legal declaration stating the Marceau Group would withdraw all investments from any company linked to Darcy. Etienne turned pale. This is a joke?" he stammered, fingers trembling. "You made the first joke," Isabelle said softly, like a midnight breeze. "At the wedding. On camera. I'm just following the tone you set." Etienne looked around the room. No pity. No rescue. And he understood this wasn't just the loss of a wife. He was about to lose everything: investor confidence, noble reputation, the lifeline of Marceau Capital. All of it was being drained in one night. I'll sue," he said, clinging to the last shred of power. "Go ahead," Malik said dryly. "Our legal team's been ready since yesterday. You think you're the only one playing chess?" Etienne's breath caught. Isabelle rose and stepped closer. She looked him straight in the eye, the man who once believed he could control her with nothing more than a last name. "You're a failed investment, Etienne," she said. "And I don't reinvest in losses." She turned toward the door. "And next time you want to play the prince, don't act like the help." Etienne left the room like a man walking out of his own grave, unsure if he was still alive. 1:47 a.m. Isabelle sent a short message to her assistant. "Prepare the press release. Title: Marceau, Darcy marriage ends due to severe breach of honor. I'll approve it at 7. She turned to her parents and nodded. No further words were needed. Then she stepped out onto the second-floor balcony, looking down at a wedding reception already falling apart. The lights were still on. The music still played. But the soul of the event had died the moment the cake hit her face. And in the silence of that night, Isabelle Marceau became a force. As for Etienne, he was just the opening move. On the top floor of the Hotel Metropole, where the Marceau family had booked the honeymoon suite, Isabelle Marceau sat alone in a private conference room. Her hair was pulled back. She wore a white blouse and black trousers. No one in her legal team still thought of her as the bride the morning after. On the screen before her was the draft of the press release. The first line was simple, decisive. "The Marceau family confirms that the marriage between Isabelle Marceau and Etienne Darcy has officially ended due to a severe breach of personal honor that occurred during the wedding ceremony at Chateau Valmont." She read each word slowly. No added drama. No blame. No avoidance. Just truth. And truth, when spoken by someone with power, becomes artillery. "Publish it," she said. The assistant pressed send. 7:06. The news began to spread. 7:13. Hashtag DRC scandal topped search trends across European social media. 7:28. Le Figaro published. Billionaire bride leaves groom on wedding night after public humiliation. Finance world shaken. 7:41. A short guest-recorded clip of Etienne smashing cake into Isabelle's face went viral. No edits. No commentary. The image alone was enough to dismantle a dynasty. 8 o'clock. Investment firms began pulling funds from Darcy Holdings. 8:32. The Darcy family spokesperson declined to comment. At Chateau Valmont, Etienne Darcy woke up in a guest room. His head throbbed, phone blinking endlessly. Within moments, he saw his name splashed across every news outlet, not as a distinguished groom, but as an international disgrace. He turned on the TV. A live segment from BBC Europe was airing. A viral video shows Etienne Darcy of a historic noble lineage smashing wedding cake into his bride's face last night. Legal experts suggest this could be the fastest annulment in upper-class history. He hurled the remote at the wall. At the Hotel Metropole, Isabelle sipped her coffee and scrolled through updates. Some elite acquaintances from Etienne's circle were scrambling for damage control. A few hollow emails pretending to show concern had trickled in. A lawyer from the Darcy side suggested post-divorce image negotiations. She smirked. "Malik," she said, "book me for a live interview on La Voix de l'Europe tonight. Not to tell the story. To redefine the place of modern women in elite marriages." Malik grinned and nodded. "You know," he said, "I used to think you chose Etienne because you were soft. Now I know you were just giving him a chance to dig his own grave. She didn't deny it. That evening, all of Europe watched as Isabelle Marceau appeared live on national television. Not as the insulted bride, but as a true CEO, composed, incisive, and in full control. Marriage, in any class, is not a license to humiliate. That's not tradition, it's a cultural failure. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm refusing silence. And I won't teach other women to be silent. I didn't lose a husband. I removed a mistake. The broadcast ended in complete silence. Within 30 minutes, #IsabelleSpeaks was the #1 trending topic across Europe. In a small bar in Zurich, 2 female students rewatched the interview on a phone. One of them muttered, "She's not just a female CEO. She's a living warning for every man who thinks a woman can be bought." The other nodded. She didn't just take back control for herself. She did it for every woman after her. The first week after the fateful wedding passed like a media tsunami. Every morning, Isabelle Marceau's name appeared on the front page of at least 3 major newspapers. The magazines that once dubbed her the future daughter-in-law of French nobility now used headlines like "The Woman Redefining Marriage" and "An Unlikely Feminist Icon." Talk shows dissected her every move. No revenge, no outburst. Just precision, public execution, and unwavering resolve. She declined all invitations to tell her personal story. No interviews with tabloids. She only appeared when there was something that needed to be said, and every time she did, Marceau Group stock rose. But while the world praised her, old doors began to close. At a closed-door meeting in Montreux Bank, where the Darcy family had once been founding shareholders, 6 board members spoke in hushed tones. "She's dismantling traditional social structures," one said. "The Marceaus are turning everything into a performance." Or maybe, the youngest in the room replied dryly, "It's just the first time someone dared to call a political marriage what it is." No one answered. From that day on, the whispers began. Isabelle was dangerous, too assertive, too controlled, not soft enough for high society. Then came the anonymous op-eds. Why would a brilliant woman walk into a loveless marriage? Behind Isabelle Marceau's calculated retaliation, cold or strategic, she knew who was behind them. She didn't need proof. The stench of crumbling nobility was unmistakable. Then, on a Friday afternoon, as Isabelle worked from the 31st floor of Marceau International Tower in Frankfurt, a call came from her assistant. "He wants to meet. Alone. No cameras. No press." She didn't need to ask who. She knew it was Etienne. She agreed not because she wanted an explanation, but because the final battle had to happen in daylight, not in the shadows. The café was tucked inside an old hotel by the main river. Too quiet for any paparazzi to bother with. Etienne arrived first, in a gray suit, tie slightly crooked. For the first time, he didn't look like the image he worked so hard to maintain. He stood when she entered, but Isabelle didn't shake his hand. She sat, placed her phone on the table, and hit record, openly, transparently. "You're still as meticulous as ever," he said with a hint of mockery. "And because you never were, I can't afford not to be," she replied. Silence. "What do you want?" she asked. Etienne looked at her. A second chance. She raised an eyebrow. "To do what? Marry me again? Reclaim assets you never owned? To undo what happened?" He said quietly. "I can help manage the backlash. I know who's turning against you. You need allies." Isabelle studied him, then tilted her head. "You still don't get it," she said. "I don't need saving, and I'm not begging for space in your system. I'm rewriting it." Etienne leaned back in his chair. He was already gone, not just in reputation but in identity. The man who once believed the world was his playground had finally hit the wall. Isabelle stood, removed her sunglasses, and looked him in the eyes one last time. Second chances don't come from last-minute regret. They come from not screwing up in the first place. She walked out, didn't look back. That night, an academic Twitter account posted a single, quiet line. Rousseau said, "A woman has power only when she no longer needs power from anyone else." Isabelle Marceau just proved it. Elsewhere, in a Manhattan penthouse, a film producer skimmed the latest headlines about Isabelle. He folded the paper and turned to his colleague. This isn't just a divorce. This is a screenplay waiting to happen. Call her. She's not a character. She's the message. At the headquarters of Marceau International, a 70-story glass tower in the heart of Frankfurt's financial district, the top executive floor had evolved beyond being a hub of economic coordination. It was becoming a cultural epicenter. 1 week after her final meeting with Etienne, Isabelle convened a special meeting, not for shareholders, not for the board, but for the women across the entire corporate ecosystem. From HR, finance, and engineering to production floors. The name of the meeting: No More Silks Behind the Glass. There were no slides, no orchestra, only one woman standing at the center of the room, speaking in a voice trained through countless global negotiations, now layered with new meaning. We don't need to bow, not in marriage, not in the boardroom, not to patriarchal culture, not to the media, and especially, not within our own company. I don't want to build an empire based solely on growth metrics. I want to build a community where no one has to endure pain to earn promotion. The room erupted, not in applause, but in something deeper, the feeling that something real had begun. At the same moment in Paris, 3 major fashion houses reached out with proposals to collaborate with Isabelle. They wanted to create an exhibit titled Fashion and Power, honoring women who had challenged traditional norms. She rejected 2 proposals, accepted one, not because of fashion but because of what it symbolized. Make it clear, she told her assistant, they don't get to use me to sell dresses. If they can't say the words power marriage, then I don't show up. Days later, the Financial Herald published an analysis titled Isabelle Marceau and the Post-Aristocracy Economy: Why Women No Longer Need Inherited Status to Create Influence. The article argued that while most female billionaires gained prominence through inheritance or marriage, Isabelle was the exception. She succeeded, was betrayed, fought back, and won using the system, but didn't leave it unchanged. She proved that power doesn't come from assets. It comes from controlling how others see you and how you define yourself. In a private meeting with her father, Henri Marceau poured 2 glasses of Armagnac. He looked at his daughter, no longer the 20-something insisting on studying in Singapore instead of Oxford. You turned a public humiliation into a movement, he said. Something no generation of men like me ever managed to do. Isabelle raised her glass. I didn't win because of you, but I thank you for teaching me how you win. He smiled for the first time in months, a smile with no defense behind it. In Zurich, a confidential meeting took place among 3 investment firms. Do we keep investing in Marceau? One man asked. A woman at the table looked at the projected image of Isabelle speaking to a room full of women. Not investing in her, she said, is investing in the losing side. Silence, then unanimous nods. That evening, Isabelle received a message from an unknown number. Just one line. I just left an abusive marriage. I didn't think I could stand again. But you stood, and now I am too. She stared at the message for several minutes. Then, she opened a new note on her laptop. Title: The Operative Feminism Project. Goal: to create a training and legal platform for women seeking to break free from abusive structures, not just in marriage, but in workplaces, institutions, and society. She typed the first line. If a wedding cake can be used as a tool of control, then silence is complicity. We will not be silent anymore. 30 days after the wedding, the name Isabelle Marceau was no longer confined to entertainment or personal finance sections. It now dominated 3 major global categories: politics, society, global power. At the European Union, a closed-door session unfolded behind the scenes of the Social Dialogue 2030 Summit. One of the hottest topics. Strategic marriages among global elites, once considered standard practice, now under fresh and uncomfortable scrutiny. The most frequently mentioned name wasn't a politician. It wasn't a prime minister. It was Isabelle. In Geneva, the headquarters of the Operative Feminism Project officially opened. A modest 3-story building with no flashy signage, just a stylized image of a torn wedding dress hem and a raised fist emerging from within. Within 48 hours, more than 4,000 women from 19 countries had signed up for support, not just because they had survived abuse, but because they were tired of asking permission to be free. Isabelle had mobilized a network of lawyers, psychologists, financial advisors, and media experts from Switzerland, Canada, India, Morocco, and Japan. They all came with one shared condition. No campaigns. Action only. We don't need another pink ribbon initiative, Isabelle told her leadership team. We need replacement architecture. Meanwhile, in the UK, a senior MP who once declared the more rights women have, the weaker families become, was forced to resign after a leaked clip of him making offensive remarks about Isabelle went viral. Not because Isabelle demanded it, but because women everywhere refused to tolerate it. Hashtags like hashtag she is not yours, hashtag bride not asset, and hashtag power in silence trended worldwide. But Isabelle didn't chase fame. She sent a single email to her media consultants. Don't turn me into a symbol. Turn me into the foundation. The following week, a major bank in Luxembourg invited her to form a strategic partnership. Isabelle declined. Soon after, she launched her own fund. The Sovereign Fund, designed to invest in women-led ventures across sectors historically dominated by men: energy, aerospace, strategic tech, and most importantly, law. The financial press called it a political bomb in economic silk. She didn't deny it. At a closed-door summit in New York among tech billionaires, a founder of one of America's largest social media platforms was asked, "What do you think of Isabelle Marceau creating a parallel financial system?" He gave a tight smile. "She's not building a parallel system. She's rewriting the main one." Back in Geneva, in her glass office overlooking Lake Leman, Isabelle stood alone after a full day of meetings with Scandinavian government reps on marital law reform. Malik entered, holding a list of new backers. "You know," he said, "when I was a kid, I thought power meant having the loudest voice in the room. And now I think power is the one who makes the room fall silent just to hear them speak softly." Isabelle smiled faintly. She didn't argue. As night fell, a phone alert appeared on her screen. Etienne Darcy resigns from Darcy Holdings executive board. Stock drops 32%. No official comment. She read it once. Didn't tap for details. Didn't need to. She turned back to her desk and opened the next initiative. At the top, in bold, EU 2026 Pilot Program Economic Consent Marriage Framework. When women control money, freedom, law, and narrative, they can no longer be bought with weddings, surnames, or seats at someone else's table. Isabelle Marceau didn't just end a marriage. She had initiated a farewell to the last century. The draft was titled, Geneva Charter on Women's Economic Sovereignty and Self-Determination. Within 48 hours, it had been sent to 30 nations, accompanied by a challenge. Sign it, implement it, or explain why not. The charter had 5 core principles. The right to refuse financial binding through marriage or bloodline. Legal accountability for financial institutions to disclose and audit marital contracts. Protection of personal dignity as a legal asset. Creation of independent bodies to investigate gendered power abuse structures. Minimum 40% female presence in decisions affecting national budgets and legacy assets. No fluff. No flourishes. No soft diplomacy. Every line was a blade slicing through centuries-old culture. When the charter was made public, the United Nations News Channel aired a special bulletin. No country outright rejected it. 15 nations, including the Nordics, Baltics, and parts of Central America, signed immediately. Germany, Japan, and Canada requested review time. France remained silent. No one was surprised. And Isabelle didn't wait. She held an open forum in Paris, inviting civil society from all backgrounds. Feminist groups, financial education orgs, youth advocates. In her opening speech, she didn't mention Etienne. Didn't mention Darcy. Didn't mention the past. None of us were born to fight each other. But we were trained to endure, to smile through pain for the camera. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to redesign. We will not beg for power. We will own the structure that creates it. The room crackled with electricity. At the Vatican, an aging bishop said during a private clergy summit, "If we don't understand this voice, the church will be left behind in the 20th century." In Silicon Valley, a 27-year-old software engineer said on a podcast, "Isabelle isn't just representing women. She's representing everyone who's ever been hidden behind the doors of power. Gender, class, race, it doesn't matter anymore. She's dragging the structure into the light." The Sovereign Fund signed an MOU with an ASEAN financial body to establish a global network of schools of marital law and legacy justice. The goal? To train a new generation of legal experts who no longer treat marriage as a transaction of assets. The program's website bore a simple quote. "We don't want to overthrow power. We just want to stop being sold as its price." That night, Isabelle walked alone into a dark meeting room in Geneva. On the wall hung the organization's new emblem. Not a rose. Not a fist. Not a plus sign. A single empty chair, the symbol of every seat that was never offered to them. She sat down. In front of her, a news alert. Spanish Parliament passes emergency legislation bans hidden asset clauses in first 3 months of marriage. The law is named Isabelle. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply drew a line in her notebook. When someone who once had cake thrown in her face can change the course of global law, she's no longer a victim. She is precedent. On a soft, sunlit morning in June, at the European Union headquarters in Brussels, a private event took place. No press, no red carpet, no live broadcast. Just an old round oak table where 12 representatives from governments, civil society, and global corporations signed the final document. The Brussels Declaration on Gender Power Balance and the Reconstruction of Social Power Structures. Not a law, not a constitution, but the first formal commitment in history between states and civil society that women should not only be heard, they should be invited to rewrite the rules. Isabelle Marceau did not sit at the main table. She sat in the back row. No suit, no glasses, no speech, because she knew. If you must shout to be recognized, you are still outside the system. But when you are silent and the system echoes your voice, you have already reached the center. At the same time, in a civics class in Nairobi, a 12-year-old girl raised her hand. "Teacher, is Isabelle a president?" The teacher smiled. "No. She's the reason many presidents now have to rewrite their questions for women." In Marrakesh, a wedding took place. No celebrities. No extravagance. But in the ceremony, one new clause had been added to the contract. A mutual commitment to respect each other's financial freedom and personal dignity as constitutional rights. At the bottom of the page, in small italic print. Ref. Isabelle Charter, January 2030. In the new headquarters of the Sovereign Fund, now present in 22 countries, the main wall displayed photos of hundreds of women. CEOs, rural teachers, battlefield nurses, single mothers, refugee lawyers, street artists. They did not share the same language. They did not come from the same class. But they had one thing in common. They no longer needed anyone to define them. At the end of the day, Isabelle stepped out onto the Geneva balcony. Lake Leman was still. The wind from the Alps carried the scent of late-season snow and lavender from the garden below. Malik appeared, holding a book. A simple black cover. One line on the front. "The narrative belongs to the one who rewrites it." Isabelle Marceau. "The first edition's printed," Malik said. "No press. No interviews. You wanted it released the right way." Isabelle opened to the first page. No foreword. Just one sentence. "I never wanted an empire. I wanted a culture where no one has to abandon themselves just to belong." She closed the book. She no longer needed to defeat anyone. She had reclaimed the one thing generations of women had been denied. Their voice. Not with rage. Not with noise. But through a reconstruction too quiet to stop. An old world had ended. Not with gunfire. But with the silent rise of those once deemed weak,